Welcome to The Committed Groove, the podcast where we're committed to the groove. I'm Linka. I work in a corporate job and I'm just here to vibe and have a good time. And yeah.
I'm Miguel. Nice to meet you guys. What can I say about me? How do we introduce ourselves?
Yeah, I know. I don't want to say my job because I feel like
right?
who cares about that, you know?
I feel like I'm very curious as a person. I love human nature, human psychology. I love understanding human nature. I think that's pretty much my quest in life.
Yeah.
And I feel like Linka, you're pretty similar,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. Like I feel like I just want to understand kind of like why are things the way they are and either how can we change them or how can we make them better.
Exactly.
And I think this podcast is kind of us coming together and kind of exploring different topics and having sort of different just kind of exploring different topics from many different lenses.
Linka came up with the topic today.
So after the news about the changes to the Canadian immigration policy, which oh my God.
There's a lot to unpack.
Yeah, we kind of were thinking about like the concept of moving abroad. I feel like a lot of us have been seeing like TikToks and Instagram reels that really glamorize the concept of like move abroad, you won't regret it. And yet at the same time, we're getting inundated with hate towards immigrants, which I think is very interesting. We're both glamorizing moving and then also like kind of hating on people who do the same thing. And I also like we both have a lot of personal experience with moving. Like both of my parents were not born in Canada. And I personally, like, I did one big move in my life. So I moved from Ottawa to Toronto, which are two cities within the same province within Canada. So it's not the biggest move, and I've only done it once. So that's my experience with moving.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, on my side, I'm from France. If you cannot already pick it up by the accent, generally people can tell really quickly. So yeah, I'm from France. I moved to the US when I was 19 to study, and then I never wanted to go back to France and Europe because like I would say at the time, especially like just the mindset was so much better, just the mentality in general, the vibe. I felt like you had so much more opportunity to be yourself
in the US.
North America.
Yeah.
North America in
North
general.
America. Yeah.
And then, but I couldn't afford to study in the US. So my family told me, you got to go to Canada, dude. And I was like, no, I don't want to go there. And I ended up going and best decision in my life. So I lived in Montreal 9 years. And I moved to Toronto last year, so it's been a year. So a lot of experience with moving.
Yeah.
I have a lot of thoughts, so I'm really excited to get into it. Maybe to start off, like, what about you, like, Linka? What did you learn? So, how old were you first of all when you moved to Toronto, and what did you learn about?
Yeah. So I was 17. I moved for university.
Okay, 17.
Yeah, I mean, I turned 18 like within the first few months, but I was 17 when I moved. And it was very much like in Canada. I'm not sure how it is in France because I know in Holland they're a little bit less like you move move away for university. But in Canada, it's very common that you graduate high school and you just move.
Yeah.
So whether that's within Canada or like somewhere else. And so I just moved. I thought it was like such a normal thing to do at the time, but looking back, I'm like that's a little crazy.
Yeah.
To just like up and leave and go somewhere 5 hours away. Yeah. It's
Did you have a lot of friends coming with you? Like
no.
Oh, really?
Like, I feel like a lot of people from my hometown did move to Toronto, but they went to, there's many universities in Toronto, and I went to one that, like, none of them went to. Okay. So I really, like, moved by myself, and I don't really have, like, that much family in Toronto or anything, so it was very much, like, a solo move, but, again, being in university, you know, you do get kind of the benefit of, like, you're just put into a dorm, which kind of automatically makes you have people to talk to.
Yeah.
So,
very true. Very true. Yeah, what did you learn about yourself? Like, I would say within the first few months, like, did you feel like, because you talked about everybody's promoting the idea of like moving to a new city as something super cool. Did you feel disappointed within the
first few, like the absolute first 3 months, I was like, this is the best. Like, everyone should do it. And then I think by like month 4 or 5, like once I had kind of like the glamour of it had kind of worn off and I kind of settled into day to day, especially because I wasn't the biggest fan of my program. Once like we had kind of settled into day to day, I was like very sad. Like I really missed who I had kind of built up in myself in Ottawa. Wow. I missed my family. I missed kind of like my friends. I think you don't notice the cool things about where you come from until you leave. And then it's like you don't have access to them anymore. I mean, I still do. Yeah. They're pretty close. But I think I really did miss Ottawa a lot. Like I don't think I kind of recognized how much it really was affecting me until I look back and I'm like, oh wow, like I do think moving felt in a weird way it was a loss. Yeah. I felt like I was losing a part of myself.
Wow.
Yeah.
So how long did it take before it became somewhat of a decent experience for you?
Yeah. I mean, I think I always enjoyed being in Toronto. Like, it's not like I disliked the city, but I think what I had to do was really find my own community.
Mm-hmm.
So it did take a
Always.
couple of years for me to really find people that I like. Because I
Years.
had friends. I mean, like 1 or 2 years, like not like crazy,
Yeah.
but
But I mean, it makes sense.
yeah, like I think you do need to kind of build those relationships over time. And that takes time.
Exactly.
Like I think to have these close relationships, you need to A, find the person, which is kind of hard to do, even in university.
Yeah.
And B, you need to like have the time to actually like make it into something that's not just like, oh, I see you every once in a while.
That's so true because, like, again, I moved to Toronto a year ago.
Yeah.
And so, like, I was telling Linka before that I went to a couple events last week. Like, I
Yeah.
went to open mics, like RD events, just to make friends. By the way, guys, we're being, like, assaulted by
Pigeons.
pigeons
I
right
know.
now.
I don't know. We have no food. I don't know
Yeah.
what they're looking for.
I think they're looking for stardom.
Yeah,
They
they
want
want to be in the
yeah,
podcast.
this is what's happening.
Like we move all the time because we're pigeons. We get you.
Yeah, exactly. So, like, I went there with the intention of making friends. The thing that I realized is it's really hard to make friends. Like,
Yeah.
it's not something that you create artificially. It's
Yeah.
like
It's very organic, but it's hard to make it
exactly,
happen.
and
Yeah.
like the chemistry has to be here. It's
Yeah.
not something you can force, and also like naturally, friendships are just much less committed as
Yeah.
relationships. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
you don't. It's like not like a relationship. When you start dating,
Yeah,
something
you're like,
also
what are we? But with friends, you can
exactly,
never, it's hard to have the what are we conversation. Like,
literally,
you're not going to be like, what are we? Best friends or casual? Like,
exactly.
that would be weird.
And ghosting is so normalized too.
Yeah.
I think it's so important to go into like social spaces with an open heart and like not too much of an intention. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Go there like to have fun. Let's say if you go
Yeah.
to an open mic, go there to play music or like do
Yeah.
stand up, but don't go there with the strong intention to go back
like
home
make
with
friends.
iPhone numbers
Exactly.
on Instagram.
Yeah.
Because I add everyone on Instagram. Nobody writes to me.
Yeah. I know. It's like, why do I even follow you? Like,
Yeah, like
yeah.
what's the point? Okay, I'm very bad at answering too, and I ghost people too, but like it's just like it's really hard, especially nowadays. There is just so much volume of information,
Yeah.
so much
And
data.
it's like there's so many people you could befriend that it
Exactly.
almost feels overwhelming to like
Yeah.
I think sometimes with school or work,
Yeah.
you get kind of it's like an edited down list of people that you can actually talk to because of like the inherent nature of it.
Yeah.
And so if you move somewhere and you don't have school or work, then there's just almost like it's like you can be friends with anyone. But then it's
Yeah.
like if you can be friends with anyone, that makes it even harder because to your
Yeah.
point, like friendships kind of happen organically from
Yeah.
spending a lot of time together. And I think that's
Exactly.
hard to do. Like that's sort of
Yeah.
hard to do artificially.
And that's why I think a way to make friendships, it's like spaces where you have to be there.
Yeah.
Like let's say work.
Work.
Such a good
I know.
place to make
People
friends.
always like, oh, like don't befriend people at work. I'm like, but then you're just gonna be lonely.
Yeah.
Like that's just so isolating to not befriend anyone at work. And I'm not saying they have to be your best friends in the whole
Yeah.
universe, but like, I don't know. I think a lot of you can make a good friend at work. for
Literally,
sure.
and it's perfect because you guys have to be there every day.
Yeah.
So, and you're living also, you're experiencing life
Things
together.
together, and you're experiencing other people and other experiences
Exactly.
together. Yeah.
Gossiping is
Yeah, gossip is
so-
so important for friendship.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what do you gossip about with somebody you just met? You know
Yeah,
what I mean?
exactly. It's like you can gossip a little bit about like the people you met, I guess, around, but like that only goes so far. But with work, it's like endless.
I'm also curious to know what being home, what's home, what's the meaning of
Yeah.
being home, and when did it feel like home for you, Toronto, and what did it take?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm also very lucky in that my parents still live in my childhood home. So I think I like for me, home is that building. Like it's like that is like I say that.
You have the same house.
Yeah, since I was a
Oh
child.
my
Yeah.
God. Can I come at some point?
Yes.
I would
Oh, you
love to
have to.
see
I
the
think
house.
you have to come to the house,
I
and you have to see the
would love to.
cottage and everything.
Oh my God,
We
yes.
should do a trip to Ottawa.
Yeah,
for
we
sure.
could do that.
And then you can also meet Sarah's parents.
Mm. We should.
But yeah, no, like, so to me, I guess that's home, and in a way, like that neighborhood, because like the neighborhood that they live in is very small and communal, so like it has like a sort of small town vibe. Like they know everyone, and my mom is still friends with people that she knew when I was like a child. So to me, I guess in a weird way, I actually consider that home as much as like my apartment in Toronto, which I've had for 10 years, also
Oh
is home.
my God.
Yeah, I love to stay put. I don't know. I feel like I just love to stay put. I
Yeah,
don't.
you have to. This is
It's just
such a
like-
cool statement. Honestly, nowadays.
Uh,
Nowadays?
like water where your plants are,
Oh.
you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it takes time to get used to a new place.
Yeah.
You know, like I moved here a year and 2 months ago, and like it's only now that I'm starting to feel home. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Like
Yeah.
it's only now that I'm starting to enjoy my place.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of
takes
time to
time,
get
yeah.
used to a new place.
And that's like what something my mom actually said about moving, because she moved, for context, my mom moved from the Netherlands to Canada for my like to be with my dad when
Yeah.
she was around like in her 30s. And she was like, when you move abroad and to a new place, you're always kind of playing catch up of like kind of coming to terms with who you are
Yeah.
and like
Ooh.
kind of being comfortable where you are. And whereas if you stay in the same place, you don't have to do that. So you can focus on other things,
Yeah.
which
Ooh.
is kind of nice. Whereas if you're kind of if you move
Yeah.
like abroad, a lot of your identity becomes you moved abroad or you
Ooh.
like are someone who moved. But when you stay in the same place, that's not your identity. Your identity can just be like you know?
Wow. Never
Yeah.
thought about it
That's
this way.
that's what she's always she's kind of anti-moving
Oh
abroad. Yeah,
wow.
even though she did it.
So now she's committed to stay in the same place.
Yes, she loves Canada now. Like she doesn't want to move back.
Hmm.
But when I was younger, she was considering moving back because she didn't really vibe that much with Canada. But then she stayed because of like
You guys.
life, like
Yeah.
us, yeah, because like her kids were very Canadian. My sister wanted to stay in Canada. Like my dad obviously wanted to stay in Canada, so she just was like, okay, like I'll stay. And now she loves Canada. But I think like she did say like moving changes your life, and it can be kind of people don't really talk about the negative side effects
Yeah.
as much as
Yeah,
maybe.
I totally agree.
Yeah,
Like, I think loneliness is
yeah,
the big part of it. Like, just isolation and how much, like, as human beings, community is so important. And that's funny
yeah,
because I was talking about it with my partner 2 days ago. Like, he's from like South Asia, and he moved so far away from his family.
yeah,
And we just talked about like it's really hard to find life meaning when your loved ones are that far.
yeah,
You know what I mean?
for
It's
sure.
like, what's the point
Yeah,
of
you're like,
working
what am
that
I
hard?
doing when my
Like,
family isn't even like accessible to me?
yes,
I see them like once every 2 years. Yeah,
Exactly, especially like in North America, and we live in like in the fifth biggest city in North America, Toronto, where it's very individualistic,
yeah,
very capitalistic.
yeah,
It's like the grind is really normalized, but to what end?
yeah.
Like,
It's like, why do you even have the grind?
yeah,
Like, it's
where are
kind
we
of
going? You know?
exactly like
Yeah,
and it's also I also feel like when you when yeah your family is that far away, it's like yeah I don't know I think hanging out with family and friend like really close friends really fills up your cup of life,
yeah,
and I think moving kind of takes that away from you in a way, like in a sense,
yeah,
not always,
yeah,
but like I think like that is also something that I think people have to come like people come to terms with. And I actually feel like this idea of like the expat versus the immigrant,
yeah. Oh,
I feel like expats, because they're usually more privileged,
yeah,
they can go home and see their
yeah,
families all the
yeah,
time.
yeah,
So that for them, it's not as much of a sad. And I mean, it still is like a big deal to move, but
yeah.
I do think for expats that kind of temporariness, whereas immigrants, like, I always think like a lot of people wouldn't move here if they had the choice.
Mm.
The fact that we even have the choice to move abroad, like I'm a European citizen, so are you.
Yeah.
We kind of can move, and I'm a Canadian. Like we can kind of move like
You're like top 0.1% of privileged people in the
yeah,
world.
I can move anywhere.
Is
But
there any
yeah,
country you cannot
any
visit?
country I can visit or move to.
Oh
But
my god. Yeah.
yeah, like I just feel like, the fact that I can even kind of debate this in my life,
Yeah.
whereas like so many other people, like,
Yeah.
I don't know, like the fact that like, if you're gay,
Yeah.
there's only so many countries you can visit or move to.
Literally. Yeah.
Or if you're gay and you live somewhere where being gay is illegal, you basically have to move.
Yeah.
Like you have to leave your family. You have to like,
Wow. Yeah.
and like it's such a privilege to even just kind of think like, oh, what if I moved
Yeah,
here? What if I
exactly.
moved here? Whereas
Exactly.
most immigrants and like people who are fleeing war or climate
Yeah.
refugees, it's like they want to stay
Yeah.
home. They want to stay put.
Yeah.
But they can't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're very right, actually. I feel like, I'm gay, but I'm also like pretty privileged in the way that my country is like it's not quite as welcoming as Canada, but it is somehow okay. I mean,
Yeah.
we can get married in
Yeah.
France, so technically it's okay, but again, we know that it's not everything. But anyways, all that to say that I do have that privilege to think. And before meeting my partner, I was like, I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do. And I
Yeah.
never made the intentional decision of staying in Canada forever. But I think it's
Yeah.
very much something in my personality. I have a very hard time committing to things like for on the long run because
Yeah.
I don't necessarily think about my future, like long-term future that much. But like since I met my partner, we decided that we wanted a family and we want to
Mhm.
adopt kids, and this is exactly what gave meaning to my life.
Yeah.
I mean, like thinking about like we want kids, this is what
Yeah.
we want to do, and we just adapt all of our life goals
To
to this.
doing this.
So
Exactly.
it's like now I'm like building my business because I
Yeah.
need to be like, again, I'm a gay guy, so I need to be so comfortable in life to adopt a
Yeah.
kid, right?
For sure.
So now the goal is really to be successful and do that so we can adopt kids. And again, it just goes back to the fact that I think so much of the meeting at the end of the day falls down like in community, right?
Yeah.
It's like at the end of the day, I mean, to me, the meeting will always end up being community. And if my family cannot be here with me,
Yeah.
I'm gonna
You're gonna
quit
make
my
yeah,
house.
exactly. No, and I think that's like yeah, I feel like that's I think what drives a lot of people when they like again like my mom's staying here because her kids are here, you
Exactly.
know, like I think like
Yeah.
home doesn't have to
Yeah.
be a set place. It can be like anywhere you want it to be, and with time anywhere can become home.
Anywhere can become
And I
home.
think like
Yeah.
that's also what's beautiful about moving. I think
Yeah.
people who move, like especially people who move abroad,
Yeah.
they have such a wealth of knowledge from all the cultures that they've experienced and like really lived in, and they know things are so much bigger than just what I think a lot of Canadians, like even just being mixed race, I feel that, but I think if you move, you just feel it even more. You just really see that there's different ways of doing things.
Yeah.
And you can kind of like with the community aspect, I feel like in Europe, community is so much more stronger than it is in
Yeah. Oh my
North
God.
America.
Yes.
And in some ways that's amazing because then they have like much better social
Yeah.
services. Like homelessness is much less rampant.
Yeah.
And then in other ways, like, yeah, people are more in your
So
business.
restricted. Yeah.
You're more
very
restricted.
Yeah.
And I think like it's kind of great when someone can kind of experience both and then decide like this is kind of which one I prefer or which one that like I want to kind of like lean into, and then either be more individualistic in Europe or be more like
Yeah.
um community oriented in
Yeah.
Canada. But I do feel like in Canada they make it hard to be community oriented.
It's very true. You know, this is something I constantly take for granted.
Yeah.
Like when I had so many good friends growing up in France. Like I had
Yeah.
strong friendship, and we have that thing in France where we have that culture of like hanging out every day.
Yeah.
People like knock on your door.
Yeah. No, my
Yeah.
mom was saying like people would just show up to her house. She
show
would
up.
like make them dinner.
We have a drink.
Yeah.
We drink every day.
Yeah.
That's really healthy.
Yeah.
That's
And I feel like that is something that I really wish we had
Yeah.
in Canada, because I feel like people in Canada are so fucking lonely, and a lot of
Yeah.
the antisocial behavior
Yeah.
they do is because they're just
Yeah.
fucking lonely. Like
Yeah.
and when I talk to my mom, like even when she had kids, like 'cause she had my sister, she still had so many friends.
Yeah.
And people here talk about having kids as if it's the end of your life.
Yeah.
And I'm like, it's because the people don't have community.
Yeah.
And
Exactly.
I think I think Europe is much more collectivist than Canada or North
But
America. Yeah.
I feel like Canada's culture in general lacks a bit of vulnerability. Like
Yeah.
people like vulnerability. Like we have a very. That's the thing. Canadians are very pleasant. Like these are people
Yeah.
you talk to.
They're like pleasant in like a very like detached way.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Everybody's gonna be polite. I mean, most people. Most people are gonna be warm. They're gonna be like welcoming. They're gonna be helpful. They're gonna be present, which I really love. It's a calm place. Like people are calm and respectful most of the time.
Yeah.
But in Europe, they're much more chaotic, emotionally toxic, and blah blah blah. But
But they
here
love each other.
for you.
Yeah.
They're gonna
exactly.
die for you.
Yeah.
They need to die.
Yeah.
Your friends, your
And
family.
you just work on. And I think in Europe you work on your relationships with people even if they're bad. Whereas in
Yeah.
Canada and North America there's this idea of like just
Let's
cut
ghost
people
them.
off
Yeah, let's
or
ghost
ghost
them.
them if
Yeah.
they're not serving you.
Yeah.
And I think that also like kind of blends into the fact that people here feel so lonely that they feel they have to move abroad or they have
Exactly.
to like leave their city.
Yeah.
You know, like this whole thing of like move to New York or move to Toronto.
Yeah.
I think it's like people do that because they feel so lonely living in small towns in Canada in comparison to a small town in France, you know?
It's a good point, right?
Yeah.
And do you feel like we find community in bigger cities? Do we?
I think you can. I think you just have to really try. I think in Canada, it's like everything is a struggle. So like finding, but I do feel like what I will say is in Canada, if you find one person with a community, you can kind of easily join the community. Whereas in Europe, it's harder to like join someone's existing community.
Yeah.
Like I feel like with you,
true.
I feel like we became friends, or like you, like we met through like a mutual friend,
Yeah.
and then now you're part of my community in
Yeah.
Toronto, and I'm part of yours,
Yeah.
and then I feel like I can be like, oh, like meet all these people.
Yeah.
Canadians are very open to that. I
Yeah.
think like Europeans are very much like these are my friends from high school.
Exactly.
I will not
And
mix you with my friends from
No.
work, and if you're a friend from work, I don't really talk to you outside of
No,
work.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
Which is actually a good thing about Canada. I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. Yeah, it's very
Yeah.
true.
It's like the people who do set up community really are like in it, and like you can really make a good group of friends moving here. I know a lot of like my coworkers from Mexico, and I feel like all of his friends are expats slash like immigrants.
Wow, yeah.
And I feel like they've really set up like a great group of
Yeah.
friends, and he's been here for like 10 years. And I just feel like, yeah, I think you can find it easily here, maybe a bit more easily than you can in
Oh, totally.
Europe.
And also, like, I just feel like it's so much more diverse here.
Than
Like,
France?
oh my God.
Even
I'm-
Paris?
Paris, no, I think if any big cities, right?
Yeah.
Big cities in the world. I mean, not every, but like in the West, at
Yeah.
least, like it's very diverse. But like here, I feel like it's so much more included in the identity of Canada.
Yeah.
Like diverse. And again, like things are not going so well right now on this aspect. So let's
Yeah.
not just like,
Yeah, it's not like perfect.
no.
Yeah.
It is not perfect, but just generally, I feel like, you know, immigration and like diversity is something that, like, for example, when we think about classic food from Toronto. We think about food from all over the world.
Yeah, like Jamaica or like the Middle East. That's like
South Asian
Toronto food,
food,
South
you know what
Asian
I
food.
mean?
Yeah.
Like the Thai food, and that tells you a lot about the identity of the
Yeah,
city, right?
that's true.
If you think about famous places in France, it's like Italian and French restaurants,
Yeah, no,
you
it's
know what I mean?
true.
It's like
Yeah.
nobody like people they love creating like restaurants from other countries, but they're gonna make it so French.
Yeah, that's true. I feel like sushi in France is like
Yeah, they could just
not.
make it a
And
gastronomic
Quebec does
experience.
this too.
Yeah,
Quebec does this too. They make it Quebec like
yeah,
they don't make it just the authentic
yeah.
thing from that place. They
Yeah.
have to make it Quebecois, and I feel like yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I have a lot of thoughts now that I moved like from Quebec to Toronto.
Yeah, tell me
Like, I
about
have,
that.
it's not very positive about Quebec because
Oh,
I love my 9 years in Quebec, but
yeah.
I feel like they're very self-centered as a culture. You
Yeah.
know what I mean?
They
So
are. They
it's like,
they don't really view the rest of Canada as important
yeah,
or
I mean,
like to be considered.
and honestly, living in Montreal for 9 years, they made me feel like the rest of Canada was shit. Like
Yeah.
the way they talk about Torontonians and stuff, it's really bad. Like every single Montrealers who come to Toronto, they're like,
They hate
it's
it.
nice, but I wouldn't live here.
Yeah.
Like
They love to say that. They
all
love to
my
say that.
friends, they come and they say that, and I'm like, I'm so annoyed, and I'm like, why? And they say, I don't know, big cities, impersonal, but it's just at the end of the day, it's a province that exists within a continent that has a lot of culture
Yeah.
as well, and there is a strong barrier between like Quebec
Quebec
and
and
the rest
rest
of
of
the
Canada.
world. Where I feel like ever since I moved to Toronto, I felt so much more open to the world.
Yeah.
Even when we talk about food, about like discovering
Mm.
food from elsewhere and stuff, there is a beautiful scene for international food in Montreal. Don't get me wrong, but it's just so much about French,
Yeah.
so much about like
It's true.
the French language, so much about
Yeah.
like so.
And I feel like even the international food in Quebec is mostly French speaking countries. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like
a bit, right?
French West
Yeah,
Africa or like
yeah,
Haiti. I don't think they
yeah,
really speak French in Haiti, but I feel like
yeah,
Haitian food is quite popular there. But
yeah,
like, it's like all very French. Whereas I feel like in Toronto, it's like countries from all
yeah,
kinds of like China, Japan, like
yeah.
Thailand, like to your point, like Lebanon, like all kinds of different countries that speak different languages and just
E-
came here and like brought their cuisine with them.
Exactly. And,
Yeah.
and I would say there is a bit, maybe, I don't even know. Maybe there is a bit more of a community feeling in Montreal. I'm not even sure about that. Like, because honestly, like, as a French person, making friends who are from Quebec was really hard.
Yeah. Well, as a Torontonian, I would say
Yeah, it's,
I don't know. Being from Ottawa, like we're on the border, so
yeah,
I like my parents weirdly like my dad works in a Quebecois
yeah.
hospital. I feel like we like had friends from Quebec, but yeah, I don't think that they're like that easy to like
Whoa,
get
it's
along with, and they kind of want you to kind of like align with their culture. They
literally,
won't like
that's the way they're
yeah
gonna open up, right? Like,
yeah
acknowledge my culture, praise on my culture,
yeah,
like,
and then all kind of shit on yours.
yeah, exactly. And this is exactly what I did with my French culture.
Yeah
Like, I had to bitch about France so
yeah
much to like get into like
yeah.
Quebecois communities. But again, gorgeous province.
Yeah.
Like,
They are once you're there, they're so welcoming and
oh my god,
like
no.
I don't want to be like, oh, they're not
Same.
welcoming, but I
Yeah.
do feel like the hatred of Toronto just like bleeds.
Oh,
I would say the same thing about Vancouver. If you say you're from Toronto and you go to Vancouver, like
but
their first statement is always, "I hate Toronto." And I'm
it's
like, when did you go?
ridiculous. Like I called to cancel my insurance from Quebec. The lady got mad at me. She's like, "Why? Why are you moving to Toronto? Why are you doing that?" She was mad. She's like, "No." She was like, literally, she didn't want me to close my insurance. I was like, "Girl, I'm already there. So stop it, okay?" And I feel like Torontonians, they're a bit more chill because they feel less threatened
Yeah.
because it's a bigger city.
Feels and
I
like
feel
they're always being compared to Toronto,
yeah,
and then they like need to like defend themselves. Whereas like Toronto's kind of like, we don't really think about you guys at
yeah.
all.
One day I was talking to some Quebecer. Sorry, I say Quebecois because I'm francophone.
No, you can say
Yeah.
Quebecois. They say that here too.
Did I say that? Okay, cool. But I was talking to a Quebecer. He was drunk, okay?
Yeah.
And it was like, we were having this deep conversation about Toronto versus Montreal. And he was like, man, they stole all of our headquarters.
Yeah, well, that's if you guys like kind of enforced your own law. Like, I feel like you make laws and then you kind of have to like deal with
Yeah,
the like
exactly.
repercussions of
It's
the
like
law.
the point of Montreal is not to make good business.
Yeah,
Otherwise, they would be much more open to
exactly.
other
Like that's not the point. The point of Montreal is to be broke and like live in like a $300 a month room and make art and like get funding
Exactly.
from the government. That's the point of living in Montreal. It is
Exactly.
the Berlin of Canada. Like
Yeah,
you go there to have a
exactly.
good time. You don't go there to like start a career
there
unless you're a French
there's
like speaking.
so much culture in Montreal. And that
Yeah.
I like honestly I do miss sometimes, you
Yeah.
know?
I think
Like
people like the whole thing of doing art for art's sake and not to make money is big in Montreal, and I love that. I
yeah.
feel like in Toronto everything's about making money.
Everything is about
So
money.
like
Yeah.
any artist or anyone you're doing, they like only want to talk to you if they feel they can get something from you, whether that's like
Yeah.
social currency or like real
Yeah.
currency.
Yeah.
Everything's about making money. Everything's about being commercial.
Yeah.
Like even if you just do a podcast with your friends, people are constantly trying to think of like how they can like
Monetize it.
to
Yeah.
monetize it. And I think that's
It
different.
it does make like very like ambitious people, and it does make you overcome so many of like your limitations. Like I do feel so much more inspired and ambitious ever
Mm.
since I moved to Toronto, you know. I feel very much isolated because it's new, but I feel
Yeah.
like 5 years from now,
You'll be
the
glad.
person I will be so much closer to who I want to be than who I was in Montreal after
Yeah.
6 years. You know what I mean? It's like I feel like it's a space where you can really explore, you can really develop yourself, you can really meet people. Like I've really found myself so much more ballsy
Yeah.
since I moved here, and that I'm really glad
Yeah.
about. I mean, maybe it's just a me thing, you know. I don't want to generalize it. I
Who
feel
you are.
much more connected to the world. And
Yeah.
like to the struggle that I hear about. I mean, maybe because everything is so US centered now,
Yeah.
but like I understand much more the US now.
Yeah.
I understand like, and it's funny because I say that, but at the same time, sometimes I talk to Torontonians and they're like, "Oh, we're nothing compared to the US," and I was like, "Oh, interesting," because to me, you're everything compared to
Yeah.
Montreal. You know?
I guess Toronto always compares them. We compare ourselves to New York.
Exactly.
And then
Yeah.
New York is
Then
like
yeah.
about
Come
you.
on.
You know, like
Yeah. Yeah.
there's always going to be a bigger fish to fry. I don't know who
Yeah.
New Yorkers compare themselves to. Probably no one because they're the center of the world.
Yeah.
But yeah, I do. I actually like growing up in Ottawa. I felt the same way. Where even though I was really sad when I moved here, it took a while to get used to it. I'm so glad I made the move because I think if I'd stayed in Ottawa, yeah, I think I would have had a kind of one-dimensional view of both Canada and like the world as a whole.
Oh wow.
And being here is more like you're right, like you're more connected to like the US. Like I work with the US people, I work with Montreal
Yeah.
people. Like and yeah, like the international aspect, like people from so many different cultures coming here. And yeah, I just think that like there's things that they do in the when you move somewhere else, like you learn so much about the way they do things elsewhere.
Yeah.
Like how like here the public transit is much better than it is in Ottawa.
Yeah.
For
Oh
example,
yeah.
that's
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
one example,
Yeah.
but like there are so many things that you kind of learn. And then also it gives you a perspective where you're like, oh, Torontonians sometimes do think they're the center of the world.
Yeah. Yeah. They do.
And then you're kind of like, oh, like they're not. And so I have that perspective that you guys aren't the center of the world, even if you think you are.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think that makes me a more well-rounded person, to be honest. Yeah.
Yeah. Who would you be if you stayed in Ottawa?
I think I just would have been a lot more like, I probably would have always thought, like, what if I had moved?
Mm.
You know? And B, I think, like, I don't know. I think, I mean, like, I have a lot of friends who did stay until now, and they, like, have such great lives. Like, they're so happy and having a great time. And I'm not saying that, like, one is better than the other. I think
Yeah.
both are valid choices. I think
Yeah.
there's reasons to stay put, aka why I've stayed put here for so long.
Yeah.
And there's reasons to move. But I think if I had stayed in Ottawa, I probably would have just been, like, I wouldn't have gone to art school. I wouldn't have, like, really met, I don't think I would have, like, shaped my, like, personality outside of being, like, who, like, the kind of person I was in high school as much.
Mm.
You know, I think if you
That's
stay
super
kind of
true.
in the same place for a long time, it's like your identity in high school, even though obviously you'll change and you'll grow, you stay a bit more within it because
Yeah.
you're in the kind of the same
Yeah.
mindset. Whereas
Yeah.
I was able to sort of be like kind of explore on all these different kinds of hats, like,
Yeah.
you know, taking comedy classes or
Yeah.
like meeting you or like
Yeah.
making friends that like didn't grow up in the same way as I did. Like I think if I'd stayed in Ottawa, I would have had more friends just like from my neighborhood, from my high school, and like yeah, like I think I still would have been super happy. I would have had a great life, and that's not to say people in Ottawa don't do that because they definitely do still. But yeah, I'm glad I moved. I'm glad I got to experience life in a new way, and I'm glad I got to meet people from other parts of Canada as well.
Yeah.
That
Exactly.
is also quite nice, is meeting people who like come from the different parts of Canada and kind of seeing the weird cultural nuances we all have, you know?
So much.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting because if you think about people who stayed home, right? Like I
Yeah.
have a lot of friends who are still in France. And the other day I was having a conversation with a very good friend of mine that I really love. And I was telling them, you know, like my partner wants to create a business, blah, blah, blah. And they were like, you know, it's not easy to create a business. And I was like, yeah, I know, but like they still want to do it. They want to create
Yeah.
their own business. They're like, you shouldn't push them because it's not for everyone. And I
Yeah.
was like, wait, what are you,
Yeah.
why are you like so defensive right now? And they were like, no, just because like, if it was that easy, everybody would do it, blah, blah, blah. And
Yeah.
I do feel like people, at least from the south of France, like are so much more restricted at
Mm.
sometimes in their way of thinking. Like they try less things. And
Yeah.
that's the thing. When you stay in your comfort zone, when you stay in the same place for a long time, sometimes
Yeah.
you like
It's the judgment of other people from your own community that you feel
Oh,
more
that's
when you're in the same place.
that's
Whereas if you
very
move,
true.
you kind of like I have a friend who moved from
That's very
Pakistan. He was like, "Oh, when I moved here, I kind or like when I moved to North America, I could kind of like not have to have that, you
yeah,
know?
yeah,
Like I feel like it's the like and my mom even said it too. She was like in Holland, it's like you're always kind of keeping up the appearance of like w- your community when
yeah.
you're in your place that you've always been. But when you're somewhere new, you can kind of just be whoever you want. And yeah,
That's
that makes you more
more
ballsy.
fun. Wow,
Yeah.
I never thought about it this way. It's
Yeah.
because probably my friend feels like just yeah, feels like very much, and also
Yeah.
like your idea, like your identity is shaped by other people, by your
Exactly.
community,
Yeah,
and that's
exactly.
us because we're far away from home
It's like more shaped by yourself.
by ourselves
Yeah.
and what we want.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's another perk of like moving. Again, like
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
want to romanticize it
One is
too much,
not
but
better than the other. I
no,
think they're both
no.
valid choices and there's definitely perks to both. But yeah, it's definitely a perk of
Oh,
moving is
and
like
she's much healthier than I am.
yeah.
Like that's what I'm talking about. Like believe me, like she's like she doesn't want to create like a big business. She
Yeah.
doesn't need all that shit.
Yeah.
She has people.
Yeah.
She has real things to focus on. I guess yeah. At the end of the day, it really depends on what you want. Do you see yourself staying in Toronto for a long time?
I'm kind of like you. I'm sort of like, let's just see where life takes
Yeah.
us. My partner like really loves Toronto. He moved here like 7 years ago, but he's
Yeah.
lived in England and Nigeria, so
Oh
he's
wow.
moved like you
Wow.
many times.
Wow.
So he loves Toronto, and I do really like it. Like I think the more I stay here, the more I'm like. I think during COVID, I kind of was like, but I think now like as the city comes back to life and as like
Yeah.
I build more of a community here, I'm starting to like it more and more, again.
Yeah.
And I
Fun life you have here.
and I was just, I could like Toronto has an international airport. I can visit anywhere I want to go with my strong passport.
Linka
And go
will
anywhere I want to
always make a strong point about the international airport.
Yeah,
That she will.
the international airport is so key, guys, because I'm just saying if you don't have it, it's way more of a hassle. But once you have it, it's like, yo,
Oh,
I just take the train, I go to the pass, and then I just fly anywhere I want to be.
yeah, the other day, like we were walking in the street, and she was like, "Dude, there is an international airport. You need to like capitalize on it. Like just use it. You know, what's
Yeah.
the point of living in a
Yeah, what's
city with an
living
international
for you?
airport?
Yeah, exactly. Otherwise, just move somewhere. Like
Yeah,
most places in Canada don't have international
yeah,
airports. So if you have one,
yeah,
like,
yeah. And I just think that movement in general is like literally moving is what being alive is. You
yeah,
know what I mean? It's
yeah,
like literally yesterday I was looking at like flights. Again, we acknowledge the privilege of having a very strong passport here. I know
yeah.
it's not something that everybody can do. But yeah, I was looking at flights. I was like, let's go to LA next week. It's like, I'm depressed. Let's go, you know?
Yeah, and you can
And
just do that.
especially I don't know if you know that company, Flair
Oh
Airlines.
my god, yeah.
Yeah, non-sponsored.
But they do make you pay for like your fucking carry-on and then they'll count
What?
anything as a carry-on. So what you have to do when you fly Flair is just like layer a bunch of clothes on top of each other and like bring like no equipment and like nothing with you.
Literally nothing.
Yeah,
Oh,
like
that's
it's annoying cuz like they're expensive like a regular airline, but then
oh,
like they make you pay for your carry-on, which is
oh, I
annoying.
mean, even a little bag?
The bag has to, because I remember me and my partner flew from New York, and the bag he had a bag that was basically his personal item, so it was pretty small.
Yeah.
But then it was like slightly too big, and
Oh,
they made him like
that
pay for
is
it, which was annoying.
disgusting.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
it's a kind of a scummy business plan.
Yeah. I
But
mean, guys, like, I don't know, whoever watched this, like, create a real low cost company in North America,
yeah, I want a low cost airline that
like
like
Ryanair.
exactly, or like fucking Wizz Air,
Come
like I
on.
want that. I don't want fucking Flair Airlines where you're paying $200 for the ticket and then have to pay like $100 for your bag.
No.
No,
Why do we pay
give
so
me 50
much money here
because
for everything?
Canada. This is what I say about Canada. It has the worst of socialism and the worst of capitalism.
Tell us more.
Okay,
Tell us
so
more.
Canada has like the shitty parts of socialism, which is like super high taxes
Yeah.
and like weird monopolies for Canadian businesses.
Yeah.
So like in telecoms and airlines.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And then I feel like, but then it has all the worst parts of capitalism where we have like no time off and we have like a horrible work life balance.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like the worst of both. Like we don't really get the perks of like capitalism the U.S. gets, where it's like high salaries, lots of innovation, like
Yeah.
really good economy. But we also don't get like the perks of socialism that like Netherlands has, which is like
Yeah.
really no like low homelessness rates, really good like maternity policies. Like
Yeah.
although I feel like their maternity leave isn't that long, but they're
Yeah.
like the help you get from the government to raise children is a
Yeah.
lot
Yeah.
in Netherlands. And then we don't really get that. We have long maternity leave, but
Yeah.
you don't really get much for it.
Yeah.
So that's what I always say. I'm like Canada kind of has the worst of both. Like I feel like we don't really get the innovation of the US because of
No.
these stupid corporate monopolies that we and
Yeah.
like groceries too.
Oh,
That's why groceries and telecoms, which are two things you need to survive, are so fucking expensive.
oh my God. Yeah.
And so yeah, we just kind of have the worst of both.
That's really true. Do your friends who come from other countries are satisfied with their
No.
life in Canada? No, all right.
Like I find people are like they come here and they're like I was sold something else.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, you're not
Yeah.
wrong. Canada has
Yeah.
a lot to offer. I love it.
Yeah.
My whole friends and family network is here.
Yeah.
But I kind of get that you are disappointed. I understand why. But I will say a lot of those problems are mostly Toronto specific.
Yeah.
Like I think if you move somewhere else in Canada,
Yeah.
maybe you wouldn't have
Exactly.
a lot like cost of
Exactly.
living, like yeah, it's expensive everywhere, but
Yeah.
I think it's more doable in other places
Yeah.
in Canada. I think Toronto is just very
Yeah.
expensive and if you don't have like yeah.
It's interesting when you say like we have horrible work-life balance. I was like, oh, interesting. In my perspective, living 9 years in
Yeah.
Quebec, I was like, it's pretty good there.
In
Like,
Quebec, yeah.
people are like don't work that
Yeah.
much.
I'm thinking
Yeah.
Toronto, like and I'm also just thinking specifically corporate because I think
Yeah.
people who work for the government have
Yeah.
really good work life
Yeah.
balance. Like in Ottawa.
Exactly.
But I
Exactly.
think in Toronto, like my corporate
Oh
job
no.
for the pay I get, which is like a fraction of what someone
Oh
in
no.
the US
It's
would get,
so
and then
bad.
I'm still expected to
No,
like
no, it's really
work
bad.
overtime if they need me, or I'm still kind of expected to like I get good vacation, but it's still like 4 weeks of vacation in Canada is considered really, really good. But like we actually have the lowest besides the US, Canada has the lowest like mandatory
Yeah.
like vacation
Yeah.
days. Like it's only 2 weeks.
Weeks, like
And that's
it's
considered
not that
amazing. But it's like,
much.
yeah, in Europe, the minimum is 5.
Yeah.
You know, like that's like the least you'll
Yeah.
get.
Yeah.
Whereas here, like getting like a good job is like 4 weeks of vacation. People are like, oh my God, like
I know,
you're so
but it's
lucky.
not that much
It's
if you
really
think
not that
about it.
much.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
that's my thing is I just feel like, yeah, like I
Yeah.
think we have pretty bad work-life balance in Toronto at
Yeah.
least.
Oh, we
Like,
do. We do.
you know, especially for corporate jobs. I think, again, government is different and like
Yeah.
any kind of public job is different. But yeah, for the corporate jobs, it's like terrible.
Terrible. No, no, I totally agree. And this is something you see, I work a lot from cafes. When I go to cafes in
Yeah.
Toronto, oh my God, like
Yeah.
sometimes it's 9 p.m. and everybody's like, okay, it's
Yeah.
time to go home.
No, I
It's
feel
so
like
normalized.
we're kind of like ours is like I think what it is in Canada is that when you're in the office, it's not that strict. Like we're not like
Yeah.
Japan where you have
Yeah.
to like follow a certain code of behavior.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
when you're in the office, it's fine. It's just that
Yeah.
you are expected to spend a lot of your time in
Yeah.
the office or a lot of your time working.
Yeah.
You know, like, and I think like there's kind of normalized to like, you know, people always joke about how in Japan you have to go for drinks after work with your coworkers, but I think in Canada you kind of have to do that too.
Oh, really? Wow.
I think so. I think
Yeah.
if you don't like at least do it once in a while when they have
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. Once in a while.
People think it's kind of weird.
Yeah, I agree.
You know, like
I
I
agree.
think whereas I think in the government, like they will never do that. So you
No,
never
for
have
sure.
to.
For
You know,
sure.
you can just leave right at
Yeah.
5.
Yeah.
So
That's very true. Also, like, I worked in HR before creating my business. I worked in HR for 5 years.
mhm.
And it's very interesting to see like how politics work in Canada.
Really,
Like, yeah, I feel like there is a lot of unwritten rules.
yeah,
Like what you said. Like, for example, especially when you're an immigrant, you have to fit in. You know what I mean? It's like you have to be the biggest cheerleader of the culture.
yeah.
You have to really like love. I mean, I don't know how it is in Toronto, but it's just something.
I think you do. Like I think if you are an immigrant and you say you don't like Canada, people get very upset.
And you get fired. You know what I mean?
Really?
If you isolate yourself from the group, you get fired.
Yeah. No, I
You get
feel like
fired for the most random reason in Canada. I got fired for the most
yeah,
random
you really
reason.
do. You really
what I
do.
mean?
People, there's no job security here. Like I feel like it's like they can just fire you for whatever
I
reason they
swear,
want. Yeah.
I swear, as a HR, we fire people for the most random reason. It's never, and they never got told. They never
Yeah.
got told that they would get
The
fired.
fire without like feedback before you like
Literally.
to me you should only get
Constantly.
fired if it's like okay like it's been like a couple months where like you're not performing and
Yeah.
but I feel like here people will just get fired and like no feedback and then after they'll be like oh they didn't perform well and I'm like yeah but did you tell them
No, but how do you define performance?
yeah
Give me a definition
yeah,
because
because you're being very vague
yeah,
about what the, like
you're
and
so
the
vague.
fact that job descriptions here are so vague because Canada is such like a friendly culture you're kind of expected to
Exactly.
help out like with everything and anything
But the
and if you don't
expectations are never
yeah,
expressed.
and it's never really expressed because like they're like
Yeah.
we want someone who won't just do the job description but I'm like but that's what a job description's for
Yes.
is to have like specifics so that but then when they make them blurred it's easier for them to fire you for any reason yeah
Exactly. But again, I feel like a lot of it is not necessarily like intentions. I worked with a lot of like, high executives and stuff.
yeah
Even them, they feel bad. They're like,
Yeah.
sorry, we have to fire you. We're gonna cry on a call and
Yeah.
stuff. But it's like it's just the system is so blurry in this
Yeah.
country. Like,
yeah I find that
nobody understand the rules. Nobody.
that actually bleeds into Canadian like like relationships I actually find. Like what you
Oh,
were saying about friendships, how it's like kind of hard to like tell like what you are, like you think the friendship is more deep and the other person
yeah,
doesn't. I feel like that like kind of blurring of like what things are. Like people in Canada will be like, I love you, visit me and my family, you're the best, but then they don't really consider you that close of a friend. And it's like I've noticed
yeah,
myself, I do it too. Like, and that's I don't like when I do it because I'm like, no, like I'm being so fucking fake.
yeah,
But that's just Canadian culture. Like
yeah,
when I moved to Toronto
yeah,
and I made friends with people in university, I felt like there's all these people where I'd be like, oh, like they're my good friend in the dorm, blah blah. And then like I'd realize that they didn't really think of me in that same way.
yeah,
And I was like, oh, like true. You know
yeah,
what I mean? Like,
yeah,
like,
yeah,
oh, like I guess like I kind of thought, and I actually found that people from Montreal who moved to Toronto, I had an easier time becoming very close friends with them.
yeah,
So a lot of my friends, or like my closest friend that I made, two of my
yeah,
closest friends I made in university, one of them is
yeah,
from Ottawa and one of them's actually from Montreal.
yeah,
And it's like those are the people I stayed like
yeah,
super good friends with, and like you know,
yeah,
I mean I still have lots of friends from Ontario, but I do feel like there's a certain vibe of like especially Toronto where they like are so like, oh my god, like you're welcome anytime, like love you,
yes,
like you're the
yes,
best, and then like
yes.
turns out like they don't really think you're that close.
Exactly.
Yeah,
And I felt the same in corporations. It's like,
yeah,
you know what? We're so happy you're an employee, but
yeah,
they get fired the week
yeah,
after. You
exactly.
know,
Yeah,
it's
they'll give
like
them like an award for like doing so good, and then they get
literally.
fired.
That's why I felt so insecure in corporations, and like literally half of the reason why I created my
Yeah,
own business because I feel like I cannot trust anyone,
yeah. No, you
especially
really cannot
like
trust anyone. Yeah.
honestly, I don't
And
love.
it's hard to move into. Like coming from a culture like France where everyone's very
Yeah. Oh,
abrasive and like they'll just tell it how it is. And then moving into a country where
yeah,
everyone's very polite and nice,
yeah,
but like will never tell you how they really feel. Or like they have a
yeah.
very hard time with that. Like that
But
must have been hard.
you know the interesting thing, because I worked in France too. My first job
Yeah.
in France, I was working in a call center and I was
Mhm.
selling death insurance to strangers that I
Yeah.
was just calling out of nowhere. Okay. So one thing I realized is that in France, like the social rules are very strong. Let's say, I don't know how to explain this. I feel like France, they spend a lot of time on drama. Like
Mm-hmm.
French culture, like it's a lot about like, let's say when you work in a call center, it's like if you're not successful at selling insurances,
Yeah.
you're a bad person. You're not good. You're not worthy
They're
of
not like,
living.
you're a great person, but I don't like you at this job. They're like,
Exactly.
we fucking hate
Yeah,
you.
I feel like in Canada they will put so much more nuance to it. They will
Yeah.
be like, you know what, you're not like it's not doing so well at
Yeah,
your
but that's
job, but it's
okay.
okay.
Yeah.
Maybe you're made for something else.
Yeah, that's true. They're very like
Yeah,
they like kind of like they kind of handle
sugarcoat
you. They sugarcoat everything. Yeah.
everything. It's like, and I love that about
Yeah.
because my self esteem is so much better since
Yeah.
girl, I was working for like a huge like charity company
Yeah.
like in France, like, and I had to basically stop people in the street and ask them to become donators.
Oh my god,
It
that's so
was really
stressful.
hard. I got fired
Yeah.
after 3 days because the girl said my manager said that I was too sensitive.
Yeah. Oh
Okay.
my god.
And like the way they fired me, it was like I was shit to them. I was garbage. It was like, you're sensitive, you're a bad influence to the group, you're putting the morale down. I was like, girl,
You're like after 3 days?
like
How do you like?
like why do you put so much weight on me? Just one out of
I'm just
10
one
people.
employee that you hired 3 days ago.
And I was like, wow. And this is what they kill your self-esteem in
Yeah,
France.
that's true.
So
That's
you know
true.
what? On that aspect, I'm very grateful for
Yeah, that's
Canadian.
true. That's true.
Because that's the thing about even human nature, if you think about it. Is it good to be too honest? Like how
Yeah, no,
how
you're right.
honest do you want to be?
You're right.
You know
Yeah,
what I
it's
mean?
kind of better to be like a little bit like I think honesty is only good if the person can actually receive it, and they can only receive it if you're being kind about it.
Exactly.
So you can be I think it's very good to be honest, but you really do have to be honest in a kind way because otherwise the person is just going to take it personally and like then your honesty is not going to be like
Welcome. Like
yeah.
because so much of the time when I'm honest, I feel like people are defensive so much to
Yeah.
the point that it becomes an ego
It
battle.
becomes more about like who's right as opposed to just like the
Exactly.
conversation about okay, this is like some feedback I have for you. And I think
Literally.
like there's the perk of Canadian culture that makes you very emotionally aware of like other people's emotions
Yeah.
and what other people are like feeling. And I think in a weird way that actually makes you very like as a Canadian, it makes it very easy to like talk to anyone because if you grow up in Canada, you're kind of used to just like sugarcoating everything, and like being good at it in a
Yeah.
way that like you're still honest, but you're sugarcoating everything.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's really true.
Yeah. Like I feel like Canadians like they do well when they travel abroad because they are very good at like
Yeah.
just being kind of a generally friendly face.
Yeah. Even if you look at the icons of Canada, okay, besides Justin Bieber, because that guy is alright. I love him, but it's just like he's not doing well. But like if you look at Shawn Mendes, like he looks so nice,
Yeah,
he looks
he
like
does
a
look like it.
nice
Yeah, but just
he's
Drake's not a nice guy.
True.
I
Really?
mean, I guess his stereotype is that he's a nice guy, but
Yeah.
I think he's just kind of creepy. But I guess he's nice.
He looks so soft.
Lanes also is not a nice guy.
Oh yeah.
Second the stallion in the foot.
Yeah.
I don't
You know what?
know.
Canadians who move to the US, they become shit. You know?
Also, Tristan Thompson cheated on Khloe
Oh my
Kardashian like
God.
25
Guy.
times. These are
Yeah.
Torontonians, by the way.
Oh,
Just saying.
you're right, actually. You're right. I think like just moving to the US fuck you up
Yeah, yeah,
because it's so toxic there. Honestly, I lived in the US 1 year, but this country,
yeah,
it is something else.
yeah. They're crazy.
It is something else.
Yeah,
I mean, they're about to elect Trump again,
yeah,
so
probably. I
but
mean,
it,
probably by the time this comes out, he'll
yeah,
have been elected.
yeah.
Did you feel like it was worth it to move all these different times? Like, how do you
Mm,
like what is your perception and also like what is worth it even mean? But like,
that's a good
do
question.
you feel like uprooting your life and moving elsewhere? Like, how has that changed you as a person? And yeah, do you feel like it's worth it, or do you feel like, yeah,
So a very good question. I think I'm a very impulsive person.
mm-hmm.
So I think when I move in a very impulsive way. I don't have that much expectations. You know what I mean? I just
Yeah,
like I move with an open heart and I try to be open. What I would say is that moving has been surprisingly easy for me
yeah,
because I did it from so early on. Like even when I was 15, my mom and I moved to a new city in France. So
mm,
like I got really, and we were moving a lot apartments wise, you know,
yeah,
and when I was a kid, we moved a lot. So I
yeah,
got really used to like creating new communities and stuff. The thing that I didn't notice and that I'm only noticing at 31 years old is how isolating it is.
yeah,
Like I feel like I'm a lone wolf, and even my partner keeps telling me like when we go to the grocery store, I'm like always like, okay, so let's meet in 20 minutes when you're done, and when I'm done, it's like, why can't we do that together? It's like, dude, I'm a lone wolf. Like you have no, I grew up alone
yeah,
because I always had to adapt, like meet new people and stuff.
yeah,
And like I was talking to my partner about it, I just realized I became very good at performing social
mm,
interactions, but I'm not very good at being myself because I'm so many different things because I
yeah,
lived in
because you've
so
moved
many
so many
different
times. Yeah.
environments that at the end of the day, I don't know who I am. You know, I
Wow.
know I'm going to disagree with everything I said about Canadian culture and Quebecois culture tomorrow because I'll go to Quebec next week and I'll be like, I fucking love Quebec. I miss it.
Yeah.
Because this is who I am. I'm so
Yeah.
unstable with my opinion. And I feel that this is what moving make does to you. It
Mm,
makes you very open-minded and like I have very strong plasticity. I can adapt to pretty much any
yeah.
environment. Like I always make the joke that I could literally talk
You
two
should talk to
hours
him. Yeah.
with people who vote for Trump.
Yeah.
Have fun with them. I
Yeah.
actually
No,
think
I think you could. Yeah,
I think
for
I
sure.
would have fun with them. I can understand everyone pretty much because I've seen so much, you
Yeah.
know. But at the end of the day, it does affect my identity and who I am as a person, and deep inside my happiness. You know,
Mm,
like I feel like for me, it's really hard to define what happiness is.
yeah.
But I stopped asking the question when I have a strong community. Like right
Yeah.
now, at this
Yeah.
very moment, I feel very much home. I
Yeah.
feel so happy and so
Yeah.
excited about the future
Yeah.
because we're doing this.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I
So
agree.
you know what I mean?
Yeah,
So
it's like the community will bring you the identity.
yeah,
And what we were saying earlier about like when you stay put, you kind of have that very strong community and that shapes your identity.
exactly.
And I think that in some ways that does help you with your life satisfaction because
Exactly.
you really feel like you have a place. And I think moving, I guess for better or for worse, moving will take you away from that place
Yeah.
and that can cause so much personal growth.
Yeah.
And I think that can cause like so much of you discovering who you are,
Yeah.
like being comfortable being alone, being able to talk to anyone. Like
Yes.
I think me and you
Yeah.
both
We
really
have
have
that.
that gift of being able to talk to so many different kinds of
Yeah.
people. But I also think in some ways it can also like, yeah, like there's definitely like, yeah, like having the community, being able to build a community by being in the same place is something that is also kind of invaluable. Like it's a super valuable.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I think there's definitely, I guess nothing is ever like worth it or not worth
No.
it.
Yeah.
It's just like they have different outcomes and
Yeah.
what you want from your life
Yeah.
depends on which outcome you would prefer.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I feel like I was somebody again growing up. I grew up in a very like homophobic space.
Yeah.
So I didn't feel very welcome during my teen during my teenage years.
Yeah.
And so like when I moved and felt a bit more welcome, like I felt like it was only exponentially getting better and better. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So it's like I've had a very positive mindset on life and
Yeah.
moving just because my life has only got better. I'm
Yeah.
the happiest I've
I
ever been.
think there's also something to be said for like if you're marginalized, it's kind of better to move.
Yeah.
Like I think
Yeah.
if you feel like you don't fit in, it's actually better to move and be somewhere where you're like
Yeah.
really like different because you can kind of like really then just find like you can shed all of the expectations from like elsewhere
Yeah.
and then move somewhere new. And I think that's also why queer people a lot of the time they move to like big cities.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
I think that's like yeah, I think that's actually yeah, I think being when you're not marginalized, maybe it's harder to move because you fit in so well with like wherever you are. But if you already kind of don't fit in there, it's
Yeah.
easier for you to move because then you can kind of just reinvent yourself and you can like, yeah, like become a kind of different, like you can kind of see different ways of doing things and see
Yeah.
different ways of being and living.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I feel like, yeah, I feel like I do find satisfaction and happiness in this chaos,
Yeah.
of like constantly like, it's like even lately I've been wondering like, is watching a lot of TikTok that bad? You know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
like
It's
I'm
true.
just like I feel like we bitch a lot about the way we live,
Mhm.
nowadays and like the internet and like how much there is too much information about and stuff like that. But isn't it also the point of being alive to just like experience as much as you
Yeah.
can? And like, okay, I'm sounding very capitalistic and Torontonian right now, but it's just like, isn't it the point, just like to expose yourself to so much, like,
Yeah.
just like
No, I agree. Like, I think, like,
chaos is
to be
good.
fair, like, I obviously, like, I'm trying to lower my screen time, but I'm also, like, back in the day, like, people probably said the same shit about radio and TV, and they did say the same thing about TV, and, like, people probably said the same thing about books. Like,
Yeah,
reading novels, probably back in the day,
yeah,
they were like, stop filling your brain with that garbage. And it's like
yeah.
Oliver Twist. But you know what I mean? Like, maybe consuming media is like I feel like I've lately been like, yeah, let me just give in to wanting to scroll because sometimes that's what your brain wants is like very short,
Yeah.
like tidbits of things. And I think like sometimes it's good to just let yourself do what you want.
Exactly.
Obviously not always, but
Yeah,
I
obviously,
think it's the Protestant work ethic we live in where it's like if you enjoy doing something, it must be morally bad for you.
literally.
And I think
Yeah.
that's kind of one of those things where it's like you must always kind of be suffering.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, we're so
Yeah.
obsessive with control in this
Yeah.
society. And I noticed that the more I try to control something, the more it goes shit.
Yeah.
It goes down. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? It's like, I feel like the best moments are pretty much the moments when
Organic.
I just
Yeah.
like fall, like, even like this podcast. Like, you gave me the idea 2 weeks ago, but I
Mm.
didn't really process the idea until this morning.
Yeah.
I woke up this morning and I was like, damn, that's going to be so cool. I'm having the
Yeah,
best
me
day
too.
just
Yeah.
because I actually let myself just like I didn't think about it, I didn't
Hmm.
plan it, and I just let it flow. And I
Yeah.
feel like so much of real quality moments and so much of like
Yeah.
real precious things in life come in that openness to everything and
Yeah.
curiosity. And I feel that this is definitely something that like you get when you move.
Yeah.
You know,
No,
I
I
feel
think
like
so, for sure.
people who stay home tend to be more control.
Yeah. Like they want to control more about their life. Like
Yeah,
they like to have like more routine and they like
like
to have
house.
knowing what, yeah, exactly. And they kind of like to know like what's the next step a
Exactly.
bit more. And I think when you move, you kind of are like, there is no next step. Like
Yeah,
I'm kind of open to whatever happens and I'm open to any kind of person I meet. I'm open to
yeah,
like anything, any
yeah,
career that I might have,
yeah,
you know?
yeah.
Yeah.
And in a way, I feel like this is the reason why I have no regrets today. I
Yeah.
have no
Yeah,
regrets.
and I'm honestly so glad you
Yeah.
had this journey because then now we're friends.
Come on.
Uh,
So
and it's so
nice.
glad I'm so glad you're here, and I'm so glad that like we can
Yeah.
be in community with each other and
Yeah.
like kind of build our work on our like have our own friendship and
Yeah.
like you know what I mean. And I think if you obviously stayed in Montreal, we would have more been friends
Yeah.
through other friends, not like
Yeah.
or one-on-one friendship. So I'm glad you moved.
Me too. It's
I'm
so
glad
nice.
you had
Like,
the yeah
yeah, we met in Montreal and we had no idea that that
yeah
was coming for
yeah
us.
exactly. But y'all actually went to Toronto a year ago, and then I feel like we just never really like connected. And then
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
recently we went to a cottage, and then we were like, oh my god, all these content
Yeah.
ideas free flowing, and we were like, this is amazing. We
Yeah.
got to do it. So
Yeah.
I'm really glad that we're friends, and I'm glad
Same.
that we're getting closer. So
Same. Yeah. Okay. To finish it up, like
yeah,
I will ask you question about Toronto.
okay,
Like, what's your favorite thing about Toronto and the thing you hate the most?
okay. I'll start with the thing I hate the most. You know, like it's like a shit sandwich. Like you say a bad thing, you say a good thing. Open face shit sandwich. Um, I think the thing that I really hate about Toronto is kind of that fakeness and that sort of like how hard it is to make. I honestly think it's very hard to make friends with people from Toronto.
Yeah.
I will say this. Most of my friends that I have here did not grow up in Toronto. And I think like, and it's not to say that I haven't been friends with people who grew up in the GTA, but those friendships always fizzle out so quickly. And they just kind of never, it's always kind of a lot of drama or a lot of like, I don't know, like I just feel like we don't really stay friends in the same way. And I feel like I always expect more from the friendship than they do.
Mm.
That's the worst thing about Toronto. But and then I guess like moving into the best thing, which is kind of connected, is that Toronto has so many most people who live here did not grow up here. And so and I don't want to generalize. I know both of these are huge broad brushes, but this has just been my experience. You can really make friends with anyone here and any walk of life and like you can do anything you want. You can eat any kind of food you want. It's like an individualist's paradise because you can anything that you might any urge you might have, there's a scene for it in Toronto. Like
Yeah.
stand-up comedy,
Yeah.
open
Yeah.
mics, and
Yeah.
then on the flip side there's like trivia nights that are always
Yeah.
here and there's
Yeah.
like, you know, people do all kinds of things. Like
Yeah.
I just feel like anything you might want to do, you can do it in Toronto.
That's very
And you
true.
can like have a like and it's still like a small enough city that like it's not like New York where each borough is basically its own city. Like I feel like Toronto is still very interconnected with
Yeah.
each other. And so yeah, I just think like in terms of building community, it is a good place, even if the people who grew up here are kind of hard to be friends with.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. I
Yeah.
love this contradiction. I
Yeah.
think it's
Yeah.
very much.
Again, like I'm not trying to be like all of them are like that or none of them are like
Exactly.
I think definitely there's definitely nuance there and like some of them are a lot easier to be friends with, but I just think in my personal experience, having lived here for 10 years, most of the closest people I have are not people who grew up here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very true.
Or even grew up in Southern Ontario. I think most of my very, very like I mean, I do have friends who grew up in Southern Ontario, but most of my very close friends I make in Toronto come from like Ottawa, Montreal, or just abroad.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Really good to know.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm trying to think about my least favorite thing. I was going to say exactly like you.
Yeah.
The fakeness. Yeah. How? Yeah. I guess this is like I do feel like it's really hard to get into spaces. Like even I don't know if you noticed that I go to cafes.
Yeah.
And I find baristas really mean.
Really?
But I mean
I
maybe
feel so friendly here. Like I went to Berlin and the baristas were mean. The ones from Germany.
Yeah, but that's the thing also. Like we understand that customer service is not easy. I don't know if you work in customer service.
Yeah, I haven't.
You haven't? Okay, I did a lot, and I was rude, and I'm a nice person, so I get it. Like it gets annoying and stuff, and you know also I have an accent. If you guys haven't noticed yet, I do have a French accent, so it's a bit annoying for people. Like I noticed like Torontonians don't like that so much.
Really,
like,
the accent.
Yeah, one day
we're so used to like accents of different types.
One day I went to order my coffee and she was like, "Oh, sorry, can you repeat? I didn't get that with your accent." I was like, "Girl, seriously." Wow. Like
that's crazy.
I get it. I have an accent, but I'm obviously fluent. Like don't insult me like that. You know,
English is perfectly easy to understand. Like
so
also because Anglophones, like we're so like most people who speak English speak it as a second language, so we're very used to understanding accents. Like you know what I mean? Like it's part of speaking English as your first language is you'll encounter so many accents.
Exactly. That's the part of English. It's an international language.
Yeah.
It's but like I would say the same with Montreal and probably the same with Bordeaux, where I come from, in Paris, and like I guess it's something very very common in a lot of cities I've visited. But yeah, my favorite thing is I guess coming from Montreal is how ambitious people are here. Like I feel like there is so much more possibility. I've never faced anyone who would tell me no.
Yeah, like people really like everyone's hustling here, and like when you hustle, they think it's cool as opposed to thinking it's like lame.
Yeah,
and I think in other places there might be more this idea that like doing that is kind of lame.
Like, guys, you gotta pay the bills.
Yeah, like come on, guys, like
the rent is high. The rent is due.
I know.
Tomorrow.
Yeah,
like we gotta work.
Yeah, you know? As Kim Kardashian would say, "Get your ass on work."
Exactly, my queen. No.
Yeah.
I'm kidding. We need to make an episode about the Kardashians.
Yeah, we totally should.
Yeah, we should.
Yeah,
yeah. What did they bring to society?
I know.
You guys, if you want to tune in,
tune in to another episode. Yeah, I think we're gonna do monthly.
Oh my god, monthly. Sorry. Yeah.
Weekly. I'm gonna burn out if we do weekly. But I think monthly we're gonna. So if you guys want, follow us. We're the Committed Groove podcast. So follow us like wherever you get your podcasts. And look forward to new content monthly. And is there anything you wanted to plug?
No,
for yourself?
Thanks so much for listening, watching, and it's been a lot of fun.
I know we're really trying to build like a good community behind this. So yeah. Anyone who listens, even if it's just a listen, you're supporting our fun passion project. So
keep grooving, guys.
Yeah, keep grooving and stay committed.